The stars looked different from the command deck of the Veltraxian flagship Eternal Glory. Commander Krazathar stood with his forearms clasped behind his back, his scaled skin catching the light from distant suns. At 8 feet tall, he towered over his bridge officers who worked quietly at their stations. None dared to disturb their commander when he was deep in thought. 300 years of perfect victories weighed heavily on Krasathar's shoulders, though he would never admit it, was a burden. His reputation was everything. His name alone had ended wars before they began. Species across 7 galaxies surrendered at the mere mention of his arrival. He was not just a commander, he was a force of nature, a living legend. "Hi, Commander," said Lieutenant Vexmore, approaching with a data tablet. "The scouts have returned from the human territories." Krazathar turned slowly, his yellow eyes narrowing. "And they are exactly as our intelligence suggested. Primitive vessels, limited weapons capability, no significant defenses on their outer colonies." Vexmore's voice carried a note of disappointment. "They will not present a challenge." "Good." Krazathar took the data tablet and scrolled through images of human ships. Small, fragile, built by beings who had only achieved space travel less than 2 centuries ago. "I grow tired of these assignments. The High Council sends me to SWAT, flies when I am built for hunting predators. The humans have shown remarkable expansion rates," Vexmore noted. "The Council considers them a potential threat if left unchecked." Krazathar laughed, a deep rumbling sound that made junior officers flinch at their stations. "A threat? Look at these vessels. No energy shields, projectile weapons. They're practically cave dwellers with rockets." He tossed the data tablet back to Vexmore and moved to the central battle planning table. With a wave of his hand, a 3-dimensional map of human-controlled space appeared. Merely 36 worlds across 12 star systems. Nothing compared to the thousands of planets. "Under Veltraxian control, we will begin with these outposts," Krazathar said, pointing to 3 small stations near the edge of human territory. "A simple message. Then we hit their mining operations here and here. Cut off resources. Their main fleet will respond, and we will crush them near this gas giant where we can use the magnetic interference to our advantage." 3 weeks to complete subjugation? Vexmore asked. 2, Krazathar corrected. "I have plans to visit my spawning grounds next month. I promised my offspring I would tell them about the Krell campaign." "Of course, Commander. I will inform the battle groups." As Vexmore walked away, Krazathar returned his gaze to the star map. Humans. He had studied them briefly, soft-skinned mammals with no natural defenses. No claws, no armor, weak muscles compared to most spacefaring species. Their only notable trait was their adaptability, but what good was adaptation against overwhelming force? Captain John Miller, of the Earth Defense Fleet, stared at the same stars from the bridge of the EDF Resolute, though he saw them very differently. Where Krazathar saw conquests waiting to happen, Miller saw homes to protect. "Captain, message from command," said Communications Officer Alan Price. "Priority 1, Miller nodded. "Put it through to my ready room." In the privacy of his small office, Miller accepted the transmission. The grim face of Admiral Kathy Winters appeared on screen. "John, we've lost contact with Outposts 7, 9, and 12 all at once." Miller felt his stomach tighten. Those outposts formed their early warning line at the edge of human space. "Equipment failure?" "Unlikely. Our deep space telescopes caught energy signatures consistent with weapons fire before communications went dark." "Big signatures, John, nothing we've seen before." "First contact situation?" Miller asked, though he already knew the answer wouldn't be good. "No. This was calculated. Surgical strikes against our forward positions." The Admiral's face hardened. "We're dispatching the 3rd Fleet to your position. You'll take command of the defensive operation until they arrive." Miller's mind raced. The Resolute was a good ship with a good crew, but it was just one vessel with 3 support frigates currently under his command. "What are we dealing with, Admiral?" "Intelligence believes it's the Veltraxians." The name hung in the air. Everyone knew about the Veltraxians from intercepted communications and trading partners' warnings. An ancient empire that expanded relentlessly, ruled by warrior castes who measured their worth in conquered worlds. Any specific tactics we should be aware of? Miller asked, keeping his voice steady. They're led by someone called Krazathar. Apparently a big deal in their military. Never lost a campaign in 3 centuries. The Admiral's image flickered slightly. I'm sending what little we have on him, but it's mostly rumors and third-hand accounts. Understood. We'll hold the line until reinforcements arrive. Good luck, John. Earth is depending on you. The transmission ended, and Miller sat in silence. For a moment. 300 years undefeated. What kind of being lived that long, fought that many wars? When he returned to the bridge, his crew could sense something had changed. They watched him carefully as he walked to his chair. Lieutenant Grant, he said to his second-in-command, plot a course to the Theta sector, maximum speed. Susan Grant nodded, her fingers already moving across the navigation controls. She had served with Miller for 7 years, since their days at the academy. If anyone could read his concern, it was her. Trouble, Captain? She asked quietly. We've made a powerful new enemy, Miller replied. All hands to battle stations. I'll brief everyone once we're underway. As the Resolute prepared to jump to faster-than-light travel, Miller reviewed the sparse file on Commander Krazathar. Images showed a towering alien with scales that gleamed like polished metal, eyes that seemed to burn with conquest, and a record of victories that spanned longer than human spaceflight itself. He's never fought humans before, Miller said to himself, finding a small comfort in that fact. The stars stretched into lines as the Resolute jumped, heading toward a battle that would change the course of human history. Neither Miller nor his crew could know that they were about to face the most feared commander in 7 galaxies, or that their actions would be the beginning of the end for his legend. Neither could Krazathar know that his perfect record was approaching its final entry. The humans were not like the others, and soon, very soon, he would learn the cost of underestimating them. The first battle was over in minutes. 3 Veltraxian destroyers against the small human outposts never stood a chance. Krazathar watched from his command chair as the defense platforms around Outpost 7 burst into silent flames, their debris floating uselessly in space. He felt nothing. No pride, no excitement, no sense of accomplishment. This was routine, like crushing insects. First phase complete, Commander, said Vexmore. All 3 outposts neutralized. No survivors. Krazathar nodded. As expected. Move to Phase 2. Target their mining operations. There is one development, sir, Vexmore added. Our sensors detected a human vessel that jumped to faster-than-light travel just before we arrived. They may have observed our attack. Good, said Krazathar. Let them spread the word. Fear is a weapon sharper than any blade. The massive Veltraxian fleet moved deeper into human territory, their engines leaving trails of blue energy behind them. Krazathar ordered a message to be broadcast on all frequencies, in the human language. This is Commander Krazathar of the Veltraxian Empire. Your worlds are now under our protection. Resistance will result in destruction. Compliance will be rewarded with survival. It was the same message he had delivered to 30 other species. Most surrendered immediately. The ones who didn't regretted their choice. Captain Miller watched the message recording with his senior officers in the Resolute's briefing room. Lieutenant Grant sat to his right, her face tight with anger. Chief Engineer Pete Wong and Security Chief Diane Clark completed the small circle. He destroyed 3 outposts with over 200 people and calls it protection, Grant said, barely controlling her voice. These Veltraxians are monsters. They're conquerors, Miller corrected. This is what they do. According to the intelligence report, they've done this to 30 other species. Wong leaned forward. Captain, the scans we took before jumping show their ships have technology far beyond ours. Energy shields that could withstand all our weapons, beam weapons that cut through station armor like it was paper. I know, Miller said. We're outmatched in every technical sense. So what's our play? Clark asked. The 3rd Fleet is still 5 days out. We can't hold them off alone. Miller stood and walked to the star map on the wall. He pointed to a region of space near Saturn. We don't fight them head-on. We use what we have, knowledge of our own territory. The rings of Saturn create a unique EM field. If we can lure their ships here, we might be able to disrupt their targeting systems long enough to land some hits. Grant nodded slowly. A hit-and-run strategy. We won't win, but we might bloody their nose. Show them we're not easy prey. Exactly, Miller said. We need to buy time for the fleet to arrive, and we need to learn more about their capabilities. Sir, Wong added, if we could capture even a small piece of their technology, I might be able to find weaknesses we can exploit. Miller nodded. That becomes our secondary objective. Now let's prepare our ships. We have less than 10 hours before they reach the mining colonies. The Theta Sector mining operation was the largest human-built structure outside Earth's solar system. 5,000 workers extracted precious minerals from a massive asteroid belt. When the Veltraxian fleet appeared on their long-range sensors, emergency evacuation protocols were activated immediately. But they weren't fast enough. Krasithars, destroyers emerged from light speed and immediately opened fire on the escape vessels. Miller watched in horror from a hidden position behind a large asteroid as dozens of civilian ships were vaporized in seconds. Monsters, Grant whispered beside him on the Resolute's bridge. Miller gripped his chair arms. Not now, Susan. We stick to the plan. He pressed the comm button. All ships execute pattern Delta, target the smallest destroyer on my mark. The 4 human ships broke from their hiding spots among the asteroids, engines flaring as they charged toward the Veltraxian fleet. Their sudden appearance caught the alien vessels by surprise, giving the humans a brief advantage. Fire all weapons, Miller ordered. The Resolute and its 3 supporting frigates concentrated their fire on a single Veltraxian destroyer. Their missiles and energy weapons struck the alien ship's shields, which flickered but held. No effect, Captain, reported the weapons officer. Keep firing, Miller ordered. We just need to get their attention. Krasithar observed the small human attack with mild interest. It was the first resistance he had encountered, pathetic as it was. Amusing, he said to Vexmore. They think they can hurt us. Should we destroy them, Commander? Vexmore asked. No, capture that largest vessel. I want to study these humans up close. Destroy the smaller ships. 3 massive Veltraxian cruisers broke formation and moved to surround the human vessels. Their tractor beams reached out, trying to lock onto the Resolute. Miller saw the trap forming. All ships emergency jump to coordinates Beta 6. The human vessels fired their engines at maximum power, breaking away from the Veltraxian cruisers and racing toward Saturn. They're running, Vexmore observed. Of course they are, Krasithar said. Pursue them. I want that ship. The chase led directly into Saturn's ring system, exactly as Miller had planned. As the human ship slipped between the ice and rock fragments, the Veltraxian vessels followed, their much larger size making navigation more difficult. Sensors degrading, reported a Veltraxian officer. The magnetic fields are interfering with targeting systems. Krasithar frowned. This was unexpected. Switch to manual targeting. But the humans knew these rings well. The Resolute suddenly cut its engines, spun 180 degrees, and fired all weapons directly at the lead Veltraxian ship's sensor array. The shots connected, causing minimal damage, but temporarily blinding the vessel's forward sensors. Break off, all ships scatter, Miller commanded. The human vessels split in different directions, each one drawing a portion of the Veltraxian fleet after them. In the confusion and sensor interference, 2 of the human frigates managed to escape. The 3rd frigate, however, was caught in a tractor beam. Before the Veltraxians could secure it, the human captain activated the self-destruct sequence. The odd explosion damaged the Veltraxian ship's tractor beam emitter, allowing the Resolute to slip away while Krasithar's forces were distracted. They sacrificed one of their ships to save the others, Vexmore noted with surprise. Krasithar watched as the Resolute disappeared into faster-than-light travel. For the first time in centuries, he felt something new. Not fear, not respect, but curiosity. These humans, he said slowly, they are more clever than I expected. Back aboard the Resolute, Miller counted the cost. 1 ship destroyed, 58. Crew members lost and thousands of civilians killed at the mining colony. But they had survived, gathered valuable data on Veltraxian capabilities, and most importantly, they had learned that the alien ships could be damaged. "What now, Captain?" Grant asked, her uniform still smudged with smoke from a console fire during their escape. "Now," Miller said, "we prepare for the next round, and we make sure their legendary commander learns that humans don't surrender easily." Neither Miller nor Krasthar knew it yet, but this small skirmish was just the beginning of what would become the most challenging campaign of the Veltraxian commander's long career. His legend was about to be tested as never before. 6 months passed, and the war was not going as Krasthar had planned. What should have been a quick 2-week conquest had turned into a drawn-out conflict. The humans refused to surrender. Every time the Veltraxians destroyed a colony or outpost, the humans fought back harder. Krasthar paced the bridge of the Eternal Glory, his claws clicking against the metal floor. The latest battle report scrolled on the main screen. 3 more human ships destroyed, but at the cost of damage to a Veltraxian cruiser. This was becoming a pattern. "I don't understand," Krasthar said to Vexmore. "They must know they cannot win. Their ships are inferior. Their weapons are primitive. Why do they keep fighting?" "Perhaps it is their nature, Commander," Vexmore suggested. "Our studies show humans form strong attachments to their territories. They will defend even hopeless positions." Krasthar stopped pacing. "The High Council is growing impatient. They expected me to add human worlds to our empire months ago. Now they question my methods." His voice lowered dangerously. "No one has ever questioned my methods before." "The Miller human continues to be a problem," Vexmore said, bringing up an image of the Resolute. "His ship has escaped destruction 17 times. His tactics are unpredictable." Krasthar studied the image of the human vessel. It wasn't impressive by Veltraxian standards. Smaller, with visible battle damage that had been hastily repaired, yet it had become a symbol of resistance for the humans. "Bring me everything we have on this Captain Miller," Krasthar ordered. "I want to understand my enemy." On the Resolute, Captain Miller was reviewing the data that Chief Engineer Wong had gathered from salvaged Veltraxian technology. The past 6 months had been a constant cycle of fighting, running, regrouping, and fighting again. His crew was exhausted but determined. "Look here, Captain," Wong said, pointing to a diagram on the screen. "Their shield generators operate on a frequency we can disrupt. If we modify our weapons to match this pattern, we might be able to penetrate their defenses." Miller nodded. "How long to make the modifications?" "For the Resolute, about 3 days. For the whole fleet." Wong's voice trailed off. "We'll share the specs with all ships," Miller decided. "Each vessel can make their own modifications." "Lieutenant." Grant entered the room carrying a data pad. Her uniform hung loose on her frame. Like everyone else, she had lost weight during the long campaign. But her eyes remained sharp and determined. "Captain, Admiral Winters has approved our plan for Proxima Centauri," she said. "The Third Fleet will meet us there in 5 days." Miller took the data pad. "Good. This will be our first major counterattack. If your formation strategy works, Susan, we might actually deal the Veltraxians a serious blow." Grant had spent weeks developing a new battle formation that used smaller, faster human ships to surround and isolate larger Veltraxian vessels. The simulation results were promising, but untested in real combat. "It will work," Grant said confidently. "The Veltraxians rely on size and power. They're not used to enemies who change tactics. Their commander has been fighting the same way for centuries because it always worked before." Miller looked at his friend with concern. "You've been studying Krasthar?" Grant nodded. "Know your enemy, right? He's brilliant, but rigid. 300 years of victories has made him predictable." "Let's hope you're right," Miller said. "Because this might be our only chance to show the Veltraxians that humans are not to be underestimated." The Proxima Centauri system was humanity's first colony beyond the solar system. Now it would be the site of their first major stand against the Veltraxian invasion. 27 human ships gathered near the system's outer planet, preparing for the arrival of the enemy fleet. Lieutenant Grant stood on the bridge of her ship, the Dauntless. As Miller's second-in-command, she had been given temporary command of her own vessel for this crucial battle. She would lead the fast attack group that would test her new formation strategy. "All ships report ready, Lieutenant," her communications officer said. Grant took a deep breath. "Signal the fleet. Begin Operation Firewall." The human ships moved into position, forming what appeared to be a standard defensive line, but they were careful to leave small, calculated gaps in their formation, gaps that would appear as weaknesses to the Veltraxians. When Krasathar's fleet arrived, he immediately noticed the human formation. "They think they can defend this system with so few ships," he said, almost laughing. "Their line has multiple weak points. Even a hatchling could see it." "It does seem too obvious, Commander," Vexmore cautioned. "The Miller human has never made such basic errors before." Krasathar waved away the concern. "Perhaps they are finally running out of resources, or courage." He pointed to the largest gap in the human line. "We will push through there and split their forces. Standard conquest formation." The Veltraxian ships moved forward, their massive hulls gleaming in the light of Proxima Centauri. They formed a wedge shape, with 3 powerful destroyers at the front aiming directly for the gap in the human defenses. Grant watched them approach, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "They're taking the bait. All ships hold position. Until my signal." The Veltraxian wedge pushed forward, accelerating as they neared the gap. Just as they committed to their course, Grant gave the order. "Now. Execute pattern sunburst." The human ships suddenly broke from their line, moving with precision that surprised the Veltraxians. Instead of maintaining their defensive wall, the smaller human vessels swarmed around the Veltraxian wedge from all sides, concentrating their newly modified weapons on specific points of the lead destroyer's shields. For the first time, their weapons punched through. On the bridge of the Eternal Glory, a junior officer turned to Krasathar in shock. "Commander, Destroyer Vexthar reports shield failures. The humans have found a way through our defenses." Krasathar rose from his command chair, his yellow eyes wide with disbelief. "Impossible." But the battle displays confirmed it. The human vessels were moving in a complex pattern he had never seen before, surrounding his ships and firing in coordinated bursts that overwhelmed the shield generators. 2 more Veltraxian ships reported damage. "Counterformation Delta 7, Krasathar ordered. "Break their swarm." But the human ships were too quick, too coordinated. They darted between the larger Veltraxian vessels, striking and then moving, before they could be targeted. It was like trying to swat insects that knew exactly where your hand would be before you moved. Grant's voice carried across the human fleet. "All ships, focus fire on target Alpha. Disable their engines." The Dauntless led a group of 5 ships in a tight formation, diving beneath the largest Veltraxian destroyer and firing repeatedly at its engine section. The shields failed, and human weapons struck the hull directly for the first time. The victory was short-lived. A Veltraxian cruiser managed to lock onto the Dauntless with its main weapon. The beam cut through the human ship's hull like paper. From the Resolute, Miller watched in horror as Grant's ship began to break apart. Emergency escape pods launched from the dying vessel, but many crew members had no time to evacuate. "Susan!" Miller shouted, though he knew she couldn't hear him. The battle raged on. Despite the loss of the Dauntless and several other ships, the human fleet managed to disable 3 Veltraxian destroyers and capture 1. It was the first significant defeat Krasathar had suffered in 3 centuries. As the Veltraxian fleet retreated to regroup, Miller stood silently on his bridge. The victory had come at a terrible cost. Lieutenant Susan Grant and most of her crew were among the dead. Miller's voice was heavy as he sent a message to all remaining human ships. "This day, we showed the Veltraxians that humans will never surrender. Lieutenant Grant's strategy has given us our first victory. Her sacrifice will not be forgotten." On the Eternal Glory, Krasathar faced something entirely new, the taste of defeat. And it was bitter. 2 weeks after the Battle of Proxima Centauri, the war entered a new phase. The news of the human victory spread quickly through both fleets. Human morale soared, while the Veltraxians were stunned. No one had defeated Commander Krasathar in 3 centuries, yet a group of primitive humans had managed it. On the Eternal Glory, Krasathar had not left his private chambers for 3 days after the defeat. When he finally emerged, his scales had dulled from their usual bright sheen. His officers avoided eye contact as he stalked back to the command chair. "Status report," he demanded. Vexmore stepped forward, holding a data tablet. "The High Council has sent reinforcements. 6 additional cruisers will arrive within the week. They are—" He hesitated before continuing, "concerned about our progress." Krasathar's claws dug into the armrests of his chair. "Concerned? I have conquered 30 species across 7 galaxies. One minor setback against these humans and the Council questions me. The Council also requests direct communication with the human leadership," Vexmore added carefully. "They believe negotiations might be more effective than continued warfare." "Negotiations?" Krasathar hissed the word like a curse. "That would be admitting these humans are our equals. I will not allow it." He stood up and moved to the main view screen. "Arrange a direct communication with the human vessel Resolute, with their Captain Miller. I will show the Council why negotiation is unnecessary." On the Resolute, Miller sat alone in his quarters staring at a holographic image of Lieutenant Grant. It had been taken during their academy graduation, both of them young and smiling, unaware of the war that would someday claim her life. He had not slept properly since her death. The chime of his door interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," he said, switching off the hologram. Chief Engineer Wong appeared in the doorway. "Captain, we've finished analyzing the captured Veltraxian ship. You're going to want to see this." In the engineering bay, Wong showed Miller the inside of the Veltraxian vessel. It was being carefully taken apart by a team of human engineers and scientists. "Their technology is incredible," Wong said, "but we can understand it. More importantly, we can replicate some of it." He led Miller to a large device that had been removed from the alien ship. "This is part of their shield generator. We've already figured out how to modify our own shields to match their frequency patterns. Within a month, we could upgrade the entire fleet." Miller nodded, feeling a small spark of hope for the first time in weeks. Susan would have loved to see this. "There's more," Wong said, moving to a computer terminal. "We accessed their database. They've done this before, Captain. 30 other species, all conquered using the same tactics. They don't adapt because they've never needed to. Until now." Miller was about to respond when his communicator beeped. "Captain, urgent message from the bridge," came a voice. "The Veltraxian flagship is hailing us. Their commander wants to speak with you directly." Miller's face hardened. "On my way." Minutes later, he stood on the bridge as his communications officer established the connection. The main screen flickered, and then the imposing figure of Commander Krasathar appeared. It was the first time Miller had seen the Veltraxian leader up close. He was even more intimidating than the intelligence report suggested. Towering height, armored scales, and yellow eyes that seemed to burn with ancient power. "Captain Miller," Krasathar's voice was deep and rumbling. "At last we meet, though only through this primitive communication system." Miller kept his face neutral. "Commander Krasathar, what do you want?" "To offer you a chance to save what remains of your species," Krasathar said. "Your victory at Proxima Centauri was unexpected, but it changes nothing. I have conquered 30 species across 7 galaxies. I have never been defeated in a war, and I will not start with humans." "You sound worried, Commander," Miller replied calmly. "Is your perfect record that important to you?" Krasathar's scales rippled in what might have been anger. "I am offering you terms, human. Surrender now, and your major colonies will be spared. Resist and we will destroy every human settlement one by one." Miller crossed his arms. "We've heard these threats before. Yet here we are, still fighting." "Yes, fighting, Krasthar said, his voice taking on a mocking tone. Like your lieutenant, the female who devised that amusing little formation. What was her name? The one who achieved nothing but her own destruction? Miller felt his blood go cold. Susan's face flashed in his mind. A waste of what little tactical talent your species possesses, Krasthar continued. Perhaps in your next life cycle you'll evolve proper exoskeletons and actually present a challenge worthy of my... Miller cut the transmission with a sharp gesture. The bridge fell silent. Every crew member stared at their captain, shocked by what they had just heard. For several long moments Miller didn't move. His face had gone completely blank, but his eyes burned with an intensity that made his officers step back. Captain? The communications officer finally asked. Miller turned slowly. Send a message to every ship in the fleet. Every colony. Every outpost. His voice was quiet but carried a steel edge no one had heard before. The Veltraxian commander has mocked our fallen, and now he learns what happens when you underestimate humanity. He walked to the tactical station and brought up a star map. Contact Admiral Winters. Tell her we're not waiting for reinforcements. We're taking the fight directly to the Veltraxians. Sir? The tactical officer looked confused. We're still outgunned. Even with the technology from the captured ship, we have something they don't. Miller interrupted. Something Krasthar can't understand. He looked around at his crew, seeing the same fire in their eyes that burned in his own. We fight for those we've lost. For Susan. For everyone who died because of Veltraxian arrogance. Throughout the human fleet, Miller's message spread. On every ship in every colony, people who had lost friends and family to the Veltraxian invasion heard how their enemy's commander had mocked their sacrifices. What had been a desperate defense transformed overnight into something more dangerous. Crusade fueled by grief and determination. On Earth, Admiral Winters received Miller's message and immediately approved his plan. Additional ships were dispatched. Weapons production doubled. Volunteers flooded recruitment centers. Krasthar, in his arrogance, had made the worst mistake possible. He had insulted humanity's fallen heroes, and he had done it to the face of a man who had loved one of those heroes. The legend of the undefeated. Commander was about to face its greatest challenge. The change in the human fleet was immediate and startling. Ships that had once fled from Veltraxian forces now hunted them. Colonies that had been easy targets were suddenly fortified and ready to fight. Throughout human space, a phrase began to appear on the sides of vessels and walls of outposts. For Grant. At first, Krasthar couldn't understand what had happened. Why had his attempt to demoralize the humans backfired so dramatically? The sudden aggression of the human forces confused him. He had faced angry enemies before, but this was different. The humans fought with a cold, focused fury that made their previous resistance seem tame by comparison. Commander, 3 more patrol ships lost in the Arcturus sector, Vexmore reported, his voice tight with concern. The humans appear to be using Lieutenant Grant's formation tactics, but they've improved upon them. Krasthar paced the bridge of the eternal glory. In the past 3 weeks, he had lost more ships than in the previous 6 months combined. The High Council was no longer just concerned. They were alarmed. How are they learning so quickly? Krasthar demanded. No species adapts at this rate. It's as if they're being driven by some force I don't understand. Vexmore hesitated before speaking. Our cultural analysts believe it may be related to your communication with Captain Miller. When you spoke of their fallen officer. That? Krasthar waved a clawed hand dismissively. I've mocked fallen enemies for centuries. It's basic psychological warfare. Humans appear to process grief differently than other species we've encountered, Vexmore explained. Rather than becoming demoralized by losses, they use them as motivation. Your words about Lieutenant Grant seem to have united them in a way nothing else could. Krasthar stopped pacing. You're telling me that my attempt to break their spirit did the opposite? That's absurd. A junior officer approached nervously. Commander, long-range sensors have detected a large human fleet approaching our position. At least 40 vessels led by the Resolute. For the first time in his long career, Krasthar felt a flicker of uncertainty. Prepare for battle, All ships to Formation Alpha. We will crush this human fleet and end their resistance, once and for all. Captain Miller stood on the bridge of the Resolute, staring at the tactical display showing the approaching Veltraxian fleet. The past 3 weeks had transformed him. Gone was the cautious, defensive commander. In his place stood a man with a single purpose: to defeat Kraz Thar. "All ships report ready, Captain," said his new second-in-command, Lieutenant Sam Rogers. Miller nodded. "Begin transmission of Grant's algorithm to all vessels." In the weeks following Grant's death, the engineering team had discovered a data file she had been working on before the Battle of Proxima Centauri. It contained advanced battle formations and tactical responses that she hadn't had time to implement. Miller had ordered the file completed and distributed to every ship in the human fleet. "Sir, the Veltraxians are forming up in their standard attack pattern," Rogers reported. "Predictable," Miller said quietly. "They never change. Execute Phase 1. The human fleet suddenly split into 5 smaller groups, each taking a different approach vector toward the Veltraxian formation. It was a more complex version of Grant's original strategy, designed specifically to counter Krazathar's preferred tactics. On the Eternal Glory, Krazthar watched the human maneuver with growing concern. "They're splitting their forces? What is Miller thinking?" "Our simulations can't predict their movement patterns," a tactical officer reported. "They keep changing course in ways that don't follow any standard combat logic." Krazathar's eyes narrowed. "Target the Resolute. Ignore the other ships. If we destroy Miller, their formation will collapse." 3 Veltraxian destroyers broke formation, moving to intercept the Resolute. It was exactly what Miller had expected. "They've taken the bait," he said. "Phase 2. Now." The human fleet suddenly executed a complex series of jumps, with ships blinking in and out of faster-than-light travel in patterns that seemed chaotic, but were precisely calculated. The Veltraxian targeting systems, designed to predict linear movements, couldn't lock onto the rapidly shifting human vessels. Meanwhile, the human ships had been equipped with modified weapons based on the captured Veltraxian technology. Their beams cut through alien shields with shocking effectiveness. "Direct hit on Veltraxian flagship," Rogers called out, his voice rising with excitement. Miller nodded, his face still grim. "All ships, focus fire on the Eternal Glory. It's time to meet the legendary commander face to face." The battle lasted for 27 hours. Both fleets took heavy losses, but the humans kept pressing forward, driven by something Krazthar couldn't comprehend. His ship's shields failed. Hull breaches appeared on multiple decks. For the first time in his long life, he faced the possibility of defeat not just in a skirmish, but in an entire war. Boarding parties detected on decks 7 through 12, Vexmore reported, his usual calm finally breaking. "They're heading for the bridge, Commander." Krazthar drew himself up to his full height. "I will face them myself. No human will take my bridge while I still stand." When the bridge doors exploded inward, Krazthar stood ready, weapon in hand. Through the smoke stepped Captain John Miller, leading a team of heavily armed human soldiers. "Commander Krazthar," Miller said, his voice cold. "Your legend ends today." Krazthar raised his weapon. "I have conquered 30 species across 7 galaxies. I will not be defeated by primitive humans." Miller stepped forward, unafraid. "You already have been." The 2 leaders faced each other in silence for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, Miller lowered his weapon and pulled out a small device from his pocket. It projected a holographic image between them. Lieutenant Susan Grant in her uniform, smiling confidently. "This is who you mocked," Miller said quietly. "You called her sacrifice meaningless. But look around you. Your legend ends here because you failed to understand one fundamental truth about humans. We don't fight hardest for victory or glory. We fight hardest for those we've lost." Krazthar looked at the image, then at the human standing before him. For the first time, he saw not a primitive being, but something he had never encountered before, a species with strength he couldn't measure by traditional standards. "I surrender," Krazthar said finally, lowering his weapon. "The Veltraxian fleet is yours." Krazthar was not executed as he expected. Instead, he was brought to Earth as a prisoner of war to witness the peace treaty between humans and Veltraxians. The High Council, shaken by the first major defeat in their history, agreed to recognize human space and establish diplomatic relations. In the years that followed, Krazathar was allowed to study human culture under guard. He became particularly interested in their concept of honoring fallen warriors, so different from the Veltraxian way of forgetting those who failed in battle. 5 years after his capture, he was permitted to visit the memorial built for those lost in what humans now called Grant's War. He stood before the statue of Lieutenant Susan Grant, her face carved in stone looking up at stars she had died defending. A familiar figure approached, Captain Miller, now Admiral Miller, the human who had ended his legend. "Do you understand, now?" Miller asked quietly. Krazathar nodded slowly. "I think I am beginning to. Your strength comes not from technology or physical power, but from something else. Something we Veltraxians lost centuries ago." "What's that?" Miller asked. "Memory," Krazathar replied. "You remember those you've lost. You carry them with you. It makes you fight harder than any species I've ever encountered." Before departing Earth to return to his homeworld, now as an ambassador rather than a conqueror, Krazathar wrote a message that was transmitted across the galaxies. It became famous throughout the cosmos, studied by species who had never met humans but would someday. "Never mock what a human loves, for in their grief lies a power no evolution could match." His legend as the undefeated commander had ended. But a new story began, one about the species that taught the great Krazathar the true meaning of strength.